This is a guy called John Freeman here. His wife, Pauline, at the same hospital, recovering from a stroke, spent 38 hours on a trolley because of overcrowding. He says, my wife was stuck on a trolley right next to the fire doors in a corridor. She couldn't get any sleep because of all the trolleys banging in. There were in excess of 20 trolleys stacked up. This is going back to the dark ages. You're the health secretary of this country. How can this be happening in modern Britain? How can you have old people suffering from stroke sitting on trolleys for 38 hours?
Well, these problems are totally unacceptable. This is the most difficult time of for the NHS in the year. It always is very difficult after the Christmas period when GP surgeries are not open over the actual days of Christmas, and then they reopen, and then a lot of people get sent to hospital. The Tuesday after Christmas was the busiest day in the history of it.
It's always busy.
It is. And the first thing I want to do is to thank NHS staff who are working incredibly hard.
But they don't want to hear your thanks, with respect.
Well, I think they do.
No, they don't. They don't want to hear your thanks. They want to know what you're going to do about it, because you've got people dying on trolleys in British hospitals. We know Christmas is busy. It's always busy. But you can't have these people, elderly people suffering from strokes, dying of cardiac arrest. That's nearly 2 days on a trolley.
I think we should be careful in generalising these descriptions, because
That's
there
not
are...
generalising.
Let me finish.
There's specific people who died in the last few days.
Piers, if you invite me onto your programme, you have to let me answer the question. I've said there are some very severe problems in some hospitals, but we also have to listen to people like Chris Hobson, who represents all the hospitals in Britain, no friend of the government when it comes to NHS policy, who says that there is not a generalised crisis. The vast majority of hospitals are actually coping slightly better. Let me finish.
You can't just say there's no crisis. 42 accident and emergency departments in this country diverted ambulances to other hospitals. That is double 2015 in the same period. Double.
Well, perhaps it would help if I told you what we're doing about this. So this year, we are putting an extra £4 billion into the NHS. Compared to last Christmas, we have 3,000 more nurses, nearly 2,000 more doctors. But we also have to have an honest discussion with the public about the role of accident and emergency departments. We have to listen to people like Professor Keith Willett, who is the NHS England person in charge of A&E departments, who says that they have to be for accident and emergency. They have to be for urgent care. I happen to think this 4-hour promise is one of the best things that we have in the NHS, but NHS England think that around 40% of people who go to A&E departments don't need to do that. And that, of course, makes it very difficult for doctors and nurses who need to give care to people who do need that urgent help.
Are there people, in light of these horrific deaths of these people who've been waiting on these trolleys in corridors for days on end, are you aware of anybody else in a similar position right now in a British hospital who may have been there 36 hours or more on a trolley waiting for treatment?
Well, the situation as of this weekend is that things have eased significantly, and the reports that we're getting back from the front line is that the number of people waiting for too long on trolleys has reduced to a handful now, so it's much, much lower than it was a week earlier. This is always the busiest week. We need to work with the public to understand that accident and emergency departments are there for what it says on the tin, for accidents and emergencies. We need to put more resources into the NHS, which is what we're doing. But also we need to recognise that as far as this government's concerned, the NHS is our top priority as a public service. We put more money than ever before. We've got more doctors than ever before, more nurses than ever before. And it is our absolute determination to make the NHS the safest and best healthcare system in the world.
There was no humanitarian crisis in the last 2 weeks in this country, when all the evidence points to the contrary. The Red Cross say there is a humanitarian crisis. Are they lying?
Well, let's look at independent people, people who represent the hospitals, senior doctors.
Why would the Red Cross exaggerate?
Well, independent people, not people who support the government on other occasions, are saying that that was the wrong description, because the vast majority of hospitals...
What does it mean to you, humanitarian crisis, that phrase?
What it means to me is, you know, terrible problems that we see in other parts of the world, and independent people are saying that is not an appropriate description. What is fair, and what we have to deal with, is the fact that we have some very serious problems in 1 or 2 hospitals, and I wouldn't minimise those at all.
What do you say to the families of those who died, who had their loved ones sitting on trolleys for 36 hours or more and then died. And when you say it's not a humanitarian crisis, what would you describe that situation to the families of those who died?
Well, every individual situation like that is, of course, a terrible tragedy. And what I would say to them is that doctors and nurses are working incredibly hard in hospitals. We are working very hard as a government to try and make sure these kind of situations don't happen.
Jeremy Corbyn's asked that you go to Parliament, or the Prime Minister goes to Parliament today and explains what's going to happen. Will you?
I am intending to go to Parliament today, and I will update the House on the situation in the NHS.
Can we ask one last question while we got you here? Not NHS, but your boss yesterday appeared to say we can't have our cake and eat it with Brexit. We're in, we're out. We can't have bits and pieces of the European Union. You're in the club or you're not. The clear inference being we're going to come out of the single market. That's how people have interpreted that. Was that your interpretation of what she said?
No, I think my interpretation is that she said what she's said all along, which is that what people voted for is for us to have control of our borders, and that's what we will get following our leaving the EU, and that we want to negotiate the best possible trade deal. But what you can't do ahead of a negotiation is predict what the outcome of that negotiation will be, because it's not just one person in the negotiation,
so
it's
just
two.
To clarify, we should not assume from what she said that we will automatically be leaving the single market.
You can't assume anything ahead of a negotiation.
Okay.
What she said is she wants the best possible trade deal for the United Kingdom.
OK. You can understand why people might be a little bit confused when she talked about, you can't have little bits and pieces of it.
Well,
it does imply you're in, you're out.
What she's saying is very clear, that what people voted for is a restoration of sovereignty, control of our borders, and that is what we will deliver.
Do you think it was very clear, or could it have been clearer?
Well, it's as clear as it can be ahead of a negotiation. But
it's
obviously,
as clear as a politician can make it.
No, it's as clear as mud. You know it and I know it.
No. What we voted for was to have a negotiation with Europe to leave the EU and get control of our borders.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what's going to happen.
We need to let you go, otherwise you won't have time to go to Parliament to make this statement on the NHS. Jeremy Hunt, thanks very much.
Thank you, Susanna.
We appreciate you coming in, as always.